Hey guys, this is Heidi with Hush Hush Magazine. Today I have a slightly different video. I basically took some time to drive around LA this July, just like a week or two ago, to show people what it looks like right now, either if you're interested in moving there or if you're just curious what it looks like right now during the pandemic. Here's a bit of a glimpse. Why am I in LA? This one's a bit of a loaded question, but to keep it short, I'll just say that I needed a change of pace, a change of weather, a change of food, change of scenery. As you all know, dealing with COVID right now is a lot. And for me in particular, as a black woman living in Seattle, where the weather has been getting better, but definitely not beach weather, not straight up summer. So I just needed a vitamin D boost. And also, I have family here, so that was also another driver in me coming. And honestly, I'm so glad that I did. It was just the refresher that I needed in the middle of COVID, which, as we know, is something that's going to stick around with us for the next like 1 to 2 years. There are several things I like about LA. The first one is that it is much more diverse than the Seattle area, especially if you're a person of color. So it's nice to be able to just walk around, I'd say, in most parts of LA, and you won't be the only black or brown person walking on the sidewalk or driving around. So that was a really nice change. Number two, obviously, as you guys can see, is the weather. Being able to see blue skies and get vitamin D. Maybe not all the time. Apparently, there's a thing called June gloom where it kind of starts out super cloudy in the morning, but then it kind of burns through and becomes super nice in the afternoon. Um, but you'll know, at some point in the week that you're gonna get your vitamin D in. You're gonna see blue skies, and you're gonna get that like dopamine that comes along with being in 75, 80-degree weather for me personally. So that's super nice. And then the third thing that I really like about LA is the food. There's so much food, there's so many options, and they're also tasty. They're really good. Like, first thing I did when I got to LA was order some Mexican food with like some old school style nacho chips where they're kind of like thick cut and you can like see like the 7 layers and it's super crunchy and delicious. It's like a meal on its own practically. So Mexican food's really good. It's a good amount of Asian food, specifically like non-Chinese Asian food, so like Korean food, Thai food, Filipino food. There's a lot of Latin American food, like Salvadorian food, um, Brazilian food, Argentinian food, and there's probably a number of like African restaurants as well. And I remember I definitely saw some Ethiopian restaurants, for example. So food is really delicious as well. Um, and the fourth thing I'd say I like about LA are honestly, I know, it's probably controversial, but I like the people. I like people in California. I feel like even though, people accuse them of being passive aggressive, of being surface level, um, but they're really nice. They're really nice and they're smiley, and that just feels good coming from Seattle and from New York, where people either are just neutral or just like not super friendly. So all those things are nice about LA. Cost of living is a great question. I might not be the best point of reference, but I would say that coming from Seattle and the Bay Area and New York City, like the other, top cities that are really expensive, LA feels, honestly, at the end of the day, I feel like it kind of balances out because rent in LA, you can find rent that's cheaper if you're willing to go out to Pasadena or like North Hollywood or um, Long Beach. Like, if you're willing to go 30 minutes out of the city, you can find cheaper rent. Like, I saw bedrooms that were as cheap as like 1,500 for one bedroom, which to me seems reasonable. Of course, you can go to cheaper cities like Philadelphia and find a one bedroom for like $800. Um, but, it is what it is. So I feel like cost of rent is manageable. There's a really wide spectrum. And then same thing with food. One thing that was really noticeable was, there were super expensive grocery stores like Erewhon and of course like your classic Whole Foods, or what was the other one? Gelson's. I don't know how you pronounce it. I think it's Gelson's, which are all kind of like higher price points. You'll buy a week's worth of groceries and come out having spent like $100 to $200 easily. But there was also like Food Town and Smart and Final and Food for Less, um, other places where they have kind of discounted prices and discounted food, but still decent quality. And at those places, you might buy a week's worth of groceries for like $50, I'd say maybe, which is pretty good. Not again as cheap as Philly, where I lived before, where they had this chain called Aldi's, where literally we bought a whole Thanksgiving dinner for 15 people for like $20. Aldi's was amazing. So I haven't seen an Aldi's out on the West Coast, but whoever has it in the South and the East Coast, take advantage of it because it's amazing. But yeah, I feel like between cost of living, probably the highest cost people might notice is for gas. Gas is more expensive, and then of course you drive around a lot in LA, um, and so you'll end up spending a lot more money on transportation and gas. But I feel like that's just a cost you have to take into account, basically. You guys can see in the video here, I'm actually driving into like a little strip mall with a Ralph's grocery store, and Ralph's is kind of like in the middle price point, I'd say. But yeah, there are lots of options, and there's a lot of food, and cost of living could be worse. It's good that like there are options, and so I think that makes it doable and livable compared to some of the other bigger cities. One thing I was really surprised by was that as I was there in June during the coronavirus pandemic 2020, I thought that everyone would be like at home minding their own business, trying to stay alive. But there were actually a lot of people at the beach. There were a lot of people at bars. There were a lot of people at the dine out restaurants. And honestly, it didn't look particularly convincing to me or super safe. So I stayed away from people. There was even one point where I was just taking my daily walk for vitamin D, walking on the beach, and someone came up behind me to like photobomb my video chat with my aunt, and they were not wearing a mask, and they were just like hovering right over my shoulder. Fortunately, I was wearing a mask. Thank God, because otherwise they would have been like spitting all into my face. So I think on average, maybe like 60% of the time I saw people wearing a mask and being distant, but there was still a lot of people that weren't doing that. So I'm not shocked that there was a second wave in LA. I think people were just fed up. But, you know, it is what it is. Hopefully the city will be able to get past it. So that's all for this video. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope that you let me know whether you like this kind of video.